Hello and welcome to another episode of Captains of Industry. I'm Bronwyn Nielsen. Our guest this week, Pieter Uys, the CEO of Vodacom. Peter, always a pleasure to chat to you.
Hi, Bronwyn.
We need to deal with the most topical question first, and that is, of course, that you are leaving Vodacom after 20 years within the fold. And I've done a lot of research on the subject. We've spoken about it, and there's nothing untoward about your leaving. Perhaps I couch the question differently. How do you feel about potentially being out of the hot seat and moving away from a company that has been such a big part of your life?
Yeah, it's 20 years. Next February or March when I leave, it's 20 years. And I've got some good memories that I can think back to. Why is it happening now? 20 years at Vodacom, I suppose at some point it has to happen. And my next move would have been overseas somewhere, and I prefer to be in South Africa. I'm passionate about the country, and I think I can still do a lot in South Africa, for South Africa.
There is a little speculation that there was some argy-bargy with Vodafone, so to speak, especially on the affirmative action side and on the black economic empowerment side. Is there any truth to that speculation?
Not at all. I'm very supportive of transformation. Vodafone is supportive of transformation, and they're a very good parent, they're a very good shareholder, very supportive, and I've worked very well with them.
And then just one more on the topic.
Yes.
Is that, of course, the speculation is that you're joining Alan, not Craig, at Cell C again, and I would probably be having the scoop of the century if you told me that you were, but I've got to put it to you. Is there any truth in that rumor or speculation?
No, most definitely. Firstly, I have a restraint. I can't go and join direct competitors immediately. But also, I think I can do something different now. There's so much more to do.
On that note, have you got any, have you made any decisions on where you're going, what you are going to be doing?
So I think it's too early to say, but firstly I'm finishing off this half of the financial year, and then Shamil Yusuf, who's an old colleague, will be taking over the second half. And I think once he's taken over, I can say more.
Well, let's move on. Hopefully we can get the exclusive on that when you have decided what you are doing and where you are going. 20 years at Vodacom. What has been your biggest achievement over that period?
Oh, there have been so many. If I think back to the early days when we built the network, just to have built a network, and I remember the day we decided to build coverage down the national road, and the whole country was laughing at us. Our competitors were laughing at us and saying, it's madness, why would you ever want coverage down the N1 to Cape Town or Durban? And we did it. Then I remember the data launch. We were part of the first group of companies across the world that launched 3G at the time. I remember, again, one of our competitors, Carl, at the time, saying that he will eat his hat if we launch by that Christmas. So I'm going to go back to him and take him a hat now.
Exactly, he's got to eat it.
But more recently, if I look at the last 4 or 5 years that I've been in the driving seat, one of the big highlights has been the listing. It was amazing to build it up to listing, having a court battle the day before the listing with government and the regulator, then listing, and initially the share price kind of flat, went down a bit, and then building it up to where it is today and delivering good shareholder returns.
Well, absolutely. Talking about good shareholder returns, since the listing you've returned 28% on an annual basis to investors, and further to that you've increased the customer base exponentially. I think added some 8 million customers direct in the fold, and then the broadband offering from a customer perspective has more than doubled under your leadership. It's going to be a tough act to follow for anybody stepping into the hot seat. Now, do you think Shamil has got the makeup to continue with the numbers that you've been delivering?
So firstly, on the numbers, just to reflect back, if somebody put money into the Vodacom share at the time, by now he would have doubled his investment. So I'm sure there are many pleased shareholders out there. But on the company side, things technologically in the world changes so quickly. If you look at the last 5 years, how smartphones have taken off, internet. We only launched 3G in 2005. In 2012, we now have 12 million in South Africa users that regularly use the internet. That can double in the next. We can connect the whole country to the internet, and then we can start making a difference. So there's still a lot for the next generation to do.
As you say, and going back to those numbers, if you had invested 1,000 Rand at listing in 2009 May, you would have over doubled, in fact, made more than double your money, so in excess of 2,000 Rand. By comparison, if you'd invested 1,000 Rand in MTN, you would have achieved 1,300 Rand, so just over that, over the same time period. It's fierce competition out there.
Yes.
How have you managed to deliver above average returns for the industry?
I think firstly you have to look at what we've done over the last 3 years inside the company. We listed, then we started building up to the rebrand, and we used the rebrand as a big milestone to also turn around the company internally. And one of our big shifts was to be more customer focused. My number one strategy that I communicated last year was to make the customer number one. But to deliver that, you have to have happy employees. And we went on a big cultural drive last year. One of the things I did was I moved out of my office early last year. And I must say, it was a big decision to not be in a comfortable office hiding away, but to now be part of the company, to feel the buzz and to hear what's going on the ground, and slowly turn the culture to be a more customer-centric company has been a great journey.
What prompted that decision? You meaning you moved into an open plan environment from the corner office?
Yeah, it was an interesting story. Just before the rebrand, I went on a roadshow visiting all the staff, and some of the comments I heard was that the leadership is hidden, they're not visible, they're not approachable.
They're in an ivory tower.
Yes, staff could not get into the lift to go to the 4th floor where I sit. So the first thing I said, okay, from tomorrow, the Monday, anybody can come to the 4th floor. But I'll take it one step further. I'll move out of my office. The office had nice, comfortable chairs and a desk and couches, and I gave it up and I turned the office into a meeting room where anybody can come and have a meeting. So it's just visibly showing the company that we're serious about changing things. I think that made a difference.
How did staff respond?
Many times they come up the lift now because they can, and they just pop their heads onto the 4th floor and see, is it true? Have I really moved out of the office? Or sometimes they walk past my PA and just say, Peter invited me for tea. I'm here for tea, and I like that.
How do they feel about your stepping down?
So I've been part of the company for 20 years. It's a big change in the company, but I'm handing over to Shamil, who's also been with the company for many, many years. So we're both part of the furniture. And Shamil's also built up good experience now in Spain, where he's spent the last almost 2 years. And he's bringing back many of those learnings. And yeah, for me, it's exciting to look forward to doing something different, exciting to still be part of South Africa. My kids are growing up. My son's in matric next year, so
I believe you may be moving down to Stellenbosch.
Yeah, so he's hopefully he'll do well enough in matric next year, and also it's important to do well this year to go to Stellenbosch University. My daughter's definitely going to school in Stellenbosch from next year. She's got to do her last 3 years at school.
Coming back to the rebranding and changing from blue to red. How has the cultural fit been with Vodafone? Has it been an easy transition, having a shareholder to that magnitude, influencing business decisions, obviously sharing expertise? Has that happened under your leadership?
Yeah, there are always ups and downs, always things that you have to work through. But if I just look at the rebrand and the decision moving up to the rebrand, it wasn't an easy decision. First of all, Vodafone, when they become a majority shareholder, they would normally like and expect you to become Vodafone. And we just, as management at the time, debated this many times, and we said, Vodacom has become such a strong brand in South Africa and Africa, for that matter, that we don't think it's a good thing to just let go of it. But in parallel with that, we were doing some homework to see, is the Vodacom brand still relevant? And many of our younger customers said, yeah, you're okay, but you kind of my dad's brand. You've become the old man's brand. And we said, let's do something, this is before we decided to go the Vodafone colours, let's do something more funky. And red came out to be a more funky, youthful colour. So when we said Vodacom red, why don't we go Vodafone? Because also more and more of the phones that we are selling has the Vodafone speech mark on there. So we had to make some connection. So putting that all together just made sense to change the brand to Vodafone, but it's kept the name Vodacom. But you asked about good and bad and synergies. So they've been a very good parent. They operate in 30 markets around the world. So the learnings that you get from that experience is just phenomenal. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to make the same mistakes. We have access as a company to all of what they do. They have access to all what we do. So So there's a lot of benefit coming from that.
Making a major move to change the corporate colour is a huge rebranding exercise, as you've acknowledged. Has it been successful? And was it easy?
Yeah, as I said at the time, it is not about the colour. It was about, for me, three things. Firstly, it is about the customer, and I promised and we promised at the time that we will deliver on a better customer experience, a better network, and better value. And you don't deliver those things overnight. You have to prove yourself to the market. But slowly, we've continued to invest in the network. Last year, again, 7 billion rand into the network. We're planning to put a similar number into the network to deliver on that promise of a quality network. Value, we continue to put value into the markets. Recently, we had the Power Hour, and you won't believe how popular it was. Power Hour, paid R5 for a call, and then you can have 1 hour worth of free calls in the daytime. We've always had promotions at night. This was our first very popular, successful daytime promotion. So to call for an hour for R5, that gives you like 7-8 cents a minute. And we had, I think, around 1 million subscribers that daily subscribe to it. So we are delivering on the promise we made.
Was it successful, the rebranding? Coming back to that question.
If I look at last year, immediately after the rebrand, Sunday Times, they do a brand survey every year. We were not #1 last year. So recently, in the last couple of weeks, we've reclaimed our #1 position again.
Well, there's the answer.
So
it's successful.
I think it is.
In terms of the kind of people that you employ around you, what is the #1 quality that you look for? And you've probably been asked this numerous times over your career.
So firstly, it is about your approach to life and about working in a team. So it's not about only the skills that you bring. You have to fit into the Vodacom culture. So that's very important to me. Then it's about trust. We have to trust each other. When I ask somebody to do something, I expect them to go and do it, that I don't have to check up on it. But the same is the other way around. Employees look up at leadership and they look for something where they can trust the leadership to steer the company in the right direction. And in the end, it's all about communicating up and communicating down. Skills, it is important, and we do look for skills, specifically in telecommunications. It's a scarce resource, not just here in Africa, it is a scarce resource in the world to be successful at a telecoms company. Yeah, it's been good.
It's time for a short ad break. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Captains of Industry. Still in studio with me, I have Pieter Uys, the CEO of Vodacom. Earlier you mentioned your son and your daughter, and interestingly, I had a conversation recently with Nikki Newton-King, the CEO of the JSE, asking her about work-life balance. And she's very clear about this. In her diary, if her son has a rugby game, she puts Jonathan's rugby match at 3 o'clock on a Wednesday and attends the rugby match. Where do you stand on work-life balance?
No, I definitely agree with her. It's not always easy, and I've probably neglected my family over the last couple of years. I remember in the early days, I used to take them with me when I went network trialing on weekends and testing the network. But it's about also clearing your mind. You have to find a balance. You can't just think work, because then you won't come up with new ideas. So I like to find a balance between work, family, and myself. You need time for yourself as well.
And part of yourself is the sports aspect, because you are very diligent in terms of keeping fit. How do you make time for it? Again, I think that these questions may seem very simple, but people really battle with the number of hours in a day and dedicating some time to yourself or to keeping fit.
But you should see it as part of the whole you. I get up early in the morning, get up at 5 or 5:30. Like this morning, I spent 45 minutes on the bicycle. It's indoor, it's too cold to go outside. But while I'm cycling indoor, I watch the TV, and I just either watch something relaxing or watch a bit of news. And I do the cycling on weekends, and I firmly believe if you have a stressful moment at work and you really want to find a solution to it, you must go and do something completely different, because that's when the mind just opens itself, and I promise you will find the answers to it. So many times when I go cycling with my friends on the weekend and I come back, I've solved all the issues that I had during the last week, and I can go fresh into the new week.
You worked for a long time with Alan Not Craig, and I've had these discussions with him. How does your leadership style differ to what Alan Knott Craig brought to the table?
As if I think, so I don't know what it's like now, but if I think back at Vodacom, I can speak more about Vodacom, and it was right at the time. As you build a company, you need more direct leadership. You have to tell everybody all the time where we're going and how we're doing it. And I think Vodacom's come to a point where we don't need a lot of that. It's a big ship, we're part of a big international company, and we have to give more delegation to the team, give more authority to them. And I've been trying to do that, to get the team to also think and come up with ideas, take some chances, because if you don't take chances, if you don't take risks, you also won't develop. So I think that's a big leadership aspect that I've tried to instill into the organization, is participative, but not completely handing over. At some points, a leader has to make the decision, but to find that balance between participative leadership and making a decision in the end.
When it comes to leaders, captains of industry, we often think that those that are in those positions of power are infallible. They don't make mistakes. They've got there because they've got a perfect track record. Have you made mistakes?
Plenty, and you always learn through them, and you always become better as an organization and as a person. We can just think over the last year, we had this Black Thursday last year, 30 June, so I've crossed out all 30 Junes out of my life when our network had a big glitch last year. But out of it, I also learned how you speak and how you respect customers and how you keep them informed about what's happening. So in the end, that Black Thursday, through the learning, has turned out to be something good for us, because we've really become more customer focused after that, and we've improved the network as well.
What would you say is the essence to crisis communication, taking what you learned from Black Thursday?
So some in the company at the time said, look, we can't get hold of anybody. It's Thursday evening, 6 o'clock, let's just keep quiet. But as I drove home that evening, I said, this is not right. So I turned back, I went back to the office, I sat with the engineers, and I logged on to Twitter at the time, because that was the only way I could figure out that I could communicate. And I started communicating to every person that had something bad to say that evening about the company. I personally replied to them. And what was so fascinating was, an hour later, and continuously there were more bad news coming through. Some of those previously upset customers started defending Vodacom, saying good things about us. And I remember till 11 o'clock that night, I kept on saying, look, we're making inroads, we're about to be live again with everything, and it really helped. It is important to communicate down in the company, tell the company what's happening, but more importantly, speak to your customers directly.
How's Twitter changed your communication style? I mean, it is amazing to be able to send you a tweet and get a response back from the CEO of Vodacom. Do you believe it's changed your communication style?
Most definitely. I remember I first joined Twitter, it was on the 1st of April in 2009.
But it wasn't an April Fool's joke.
It wasn't an April Fool's joke. So initially, I did it to also follow influential people, to know what's happening in the world. Because up till that point in time, my media people in the company, every morning they brought me tons and stacks of paper of what's happening in the world. And I found out that if you follow the right people, you can really know, like you, if you follow, you can really know.
I take that as a compliment.
You really know what's happening in the world. But then I also, people discovered that I was on Twitter, and they started copying me when they had something bad to say about Vodacom, and it really hurt. So I said, let's see what happens. Let me personally take responsibility for some of those complaints. And I think it paid off. So I enjoy communicating. I enjoy caring about, even if it's the smallest complaint. And now today we have a whole group of people manning our Twitter account. We have a Vodacom Twitter account. Immediately thereafter, we also started Vodacom, or at Vodacom 111, which is our customer line on Twitter. I think it's probably one of the first in the world.
Do you think other CEOs should embrace the Twitter application or the Twitter platform? Slowly, we're seeing more high-profile captains of industry coming into the space, but do you think it's something they should take a lot more seriously?
Either personally or as the company, it's something you can't ignore, because customers change. We get more and more younger customers, and they definitely communicate differently. If I look at my kids, they call less, they communicate more through Twitter, Facebook, messaging, instant messaging. So if you, as a company, not represented there, you will lose that segment of the market. So very important.
Coming back to the Vodacom story, one of the bigger challenges has been some of your expansions into territories beyond South Africa, and namely the DRC, where obviously there has been negative news flow out of that territory. How have you dealt with those challenges, and how do you see Vodacom going forward with their Africa strategy?
So as a start, I would like to say that yes, we've struggled, not just in the DRC. Our performance out of the African portfolio has not been the best up till recently. So we made some changes. We really started focusing on the African portfolio. And when we did our quarterly update now recently, the Africa portfolio contributed 21% to the revenue. So it's becoming meaningful. We went through times where there was fierce competition. We didn't know how to respond to that immediately, so we learned. But now we've learned, we've corrected things, we've changed the way we run the businesses, and we are the number one network in those countries again. And again,
is there a key formula to operating in Africa?
There's not one formula. The countries differ so much. Initially, we made that mistake. We thought we're now successful in South Africa, we can just copy it. It is not true. If you take a country like Tanzania and DRC, people behave differently. In the one country, they would recharge electronically more easily. In another country, they want to feel the piece of paper that your pen is written on. So those things, subtle differences, but it makes a big difference in the end. DRC specifically, never give up. It's been a long uphill battle. The business is doing very well at the moment. We've not had to put money into it. The business is looking after itself financially. Good leadership there. There are some issues that we still have to sort out. And again, I'm saying we're not going to give up because I believe in the country. I've been to the DRC so many times. Probably the most friendly people that you can find anywhere in the world are in the DRC. And they've had their own issues, but they're working through it. The potential in the DRC is so huge. There's not a mineral, I think, that's not in the DRC. So they're resource rich, penetration, sub 20%. So the potential is just huge, and communication is part of their solution as well.
One of the biggest challenges in the telecommunications industry must be keeping up with the innovation that is out there. And now we've got to look at voice versus data. It must be a constant challenge for you and your team. 5 years out, how do you think the landscape is going to appear in telecommunications?
So 5 years is a long time. Things happen very quickly.
Absolutely, in the life of the telco industry.
So if I think 5 years, it's probably going to be dramatically different. Because if I just look at the last 2 years, how it's changed. So 5 years out, everybody will have a smartphone. You will only get smartphones. You will not be able to buy a normal phone. And we're seeing that trend. With a smartphone then, it is all about communicating. It's not about making the call, it's about being connected. So I think we'll see a lot more customers buying a service from us where they have peace of mind and they just pay for their communication services. And it'll include voice and data and messaging, and they'll just do whatever they want to do and stay connected. But communication will in 5 years' time become much more sophisticated. The devices, I'm sure that the phone that you and I have now has more processing power than the first Apollo moon ship that went to land on the moon.
You are obviously integral to the communication story in South Africa, and we've only got 1 minute left. Do you think that you're going to, and as you said, it's too early to tell what you're going to do next, but you're passionate about what you do. Can we assume that you'll still incorporate something in communication, or am I pushing you too hard on that front?
South Africa is a small country here, and telecommunications is part of the future, and there's a direct feedback from telecommunications in economic development, so you can't run away from it. So whatever I do, there'll always be a part of communications in there.
Pieter, thanks so much for your time. That's a wrap of this edition of Captains of Industry. Until next time, from myself, Bronwyn Nielsen, goodbye.